flower.
Good evening, this is BelGeode, and we're going to do a little bit of behind the scenes this time around. I've had a number of people ask me if the missions that I've been flying I've created, and I thought I made that pretty clear in the beginning of the mission that yeah, some of these missions I actually did create from scratch. So I figured, I wonder if there would be a benefit if I actually show you how to go about creating missions using the mission editor. I think it might be worth a shot, so let's go ahead and do that. I actually have one that I made last night as a test, just to test out some of the various features of the Mi-8 helicopter which I've been flying. But I think I'm going to expand upon this and actually make it a full-fledged mission. So let's go ahead and find the mission in the mission editor, and we'll take it from there, and I'll show you exactly what we've got to look at here. Okay, first thing we need to do is open this up. I've called it Door Test 1 because when I originally started it, it was just to test some of the automated features that would allow me to open the Mi-8 doors. So we'll pop it open. Alright, there we go. Okay, so what are we looking at here? Well, first things first, we're looking at the area of Novorossiysk and Gelendzhik, and what I've done is I've added my helicopter, which is an Mi-8. I've added that on the tarmac, but I have not added any waypoints, which pretty much means I'm here as an observer. I'm not going anywhere. You can change things like, what your paint scheme is. I've got like this muted green paint scheme. I've got nothing as far as armament or armor for that matter. Everything's basically just turned off. And I'm just sitting here. That's my sole purpose in this whole thing, is to sit here as an observer. So here's what I've set up. I have set up another helicopter that's going to fly in to Novorossiysk Airport. It's going to pick up a group of soldiers, 6 soldiers, and then it's going to fly out to Gelendzhik, where it's going to drop these soldiers off. They're going to engage with the enemy here, and it's going to turn around after the soldiers are done, pick them up, fly around Novorossiysk, and then back to the airport, drop these guys off at the airport, and then park on this FARP, which is a forward arming and refueling post. How did we make all of that happen? Well, the first thing we did was we actually placed the helicopter and assigned certain flight plans to it, or a flight path. Now, you're going to see this come up a lot too. These are trigger zones. I'll go into that in a moment. But just to get over the actual flight plan itself, there's a couple of things that I've done. Right here, you will see the list of the various waypoints. SP stands for starting point. If we go to waypoint number 1, you'll see that's now yellow. This waypoint is where we're going to land and pick up the troops. So you can't really see it from here, but there's a little white triangle that indicates the helicopter must land exactly on this spot in order to pick up the troops. And as a part of that whole landing condition, when we open this up here, you'll see I don't have anything set here, but I do have a stop condition. The stop condition is when user flag is true. User flag number 1 is true. We'll go over flags in a minute here, but just remember that for now because that's pretty important. Alright, so moving on, after we've got the soldiers, we want to take them over to Gelendzhik, and when we get to waypoint 2, you'll see we have another call for the helicopter to land. Again, you can't really see the triangle because it's white on white, but it's supposed to land right in the middle of this X here. And we have another condition to stop the whole landing procedure, and that is if user flag number 2 is true. Again, just keep that in mind. We'll come back to it. So after that has been done, we're going to go back through these other waypoints and then back to the main airport where we have one final waypoint called land and drop off. Now you can see the triangle here. It's smack dab in the center of this trigger zone. And again, here's another landing condition. Now, instead of actually having something that says user flag whatever, instead I actually have this check marked where on land it's 20 seconds. Basically what that means, once this helicopter lands exactly in the spot, it's to stay there for 20 seconds and then take off afterwards and continue on its merry way, which, as you can see, it's got one more waypoint there, and then it gets to land on the FARP, and that's it. It's done. So that's step one. We've got the helicopter taken care of. We know where it's going to fly. We know how many times it's going to land. And we also have little trigger zones. Now the trigger zones, let's talk about that real quick here. We've got 4 of these trigger zones here. The first one that we've got is the pickup spot. Actually, let's go backwards a little bit. Let's start with soldiers move. I placed this one directly in the flight path of the helicopter. So when it goes through this zone, the soldiers, which are going to start out right here, are going to be triggered to move towards the end of the tarmac to this little green spot here where they're going to get picked up. That brings us to our second trigger point. This trigger point is where the helicopter is going to land, but it's also where the soldiers are heading to. Once everybody's in that circle area and some other conditions are met, the soldiers will get picked up. Then it's going to drop them off over at Gelendzик, so we just kind of teleported over here real quick. You can see waypoint 2. You remember the helicopter is supposed to stop right there. This drop-off point is also going to be a stay and hold point for the helicopter, because once these soldiers get out, they're going to walk or run to the end of the runway, and then on their way back they're going to engage the American soldiers. Hopefully they will destroy all the American soldiers and then get to waypoint 2 and come back to this spot. Once the soldiers reach back into this spot, then it will trigger for them to get back on the helicopter, and the helicopter will take off. And then we have our final drop-off spot, which is back at Novorossiysk Airport. Same story. Helicopters got the word to drop these guys off here, which will trigger these soldiers to spawn once the helicopter's on the ground. Once that happens, these little guys will walk over here. Now, here's where it gets a little bit creative with this mission editor. In order to make the group of 6 soldiers do all of that stuff that I just told you about, we actually had to create several different groups of soldiers. So let me show you the group listing here and you'll get an idea. For some strange reason, it picks the FARP as a group. It's an item technically, even though what it really is a landing platform, but we won't even worry about that. The sole purpose of the FARP is to land the helicopters. That's it. We have a group of enemy soldiers over here. That's the US troops that are going to be coming in there, who are going to meet an untimely end. I'm really sorry about that, US troops. I really support the troops, but for the case of this mission here, yeah, you guys are going to have to die. Sorry. So we've got the new helicopter group, which is me. We've got the pickup helo, which is of course the star of our show. And then we have these 3 groups of soldiers. This is how we made this happen. First off, when we get to the soldiers move, this group of soldiers, which will be sitting here at the start of the mission, they're going to get the command to move to the pickup spot. When the helicopter's down, in order to quote-unquote pick them up, it has to make these soldiers completely disappear from the world. So they're gone for good once they're picked up. Then we have the second group of soldiers, which are over at Gelendzik Airport. These are the guys that are going to engage the American troops and run around the airport and get back. Those guys, of course, get spawned once the helicopter's down, but they go away completely once they've accomplished their objective. And then last but not least, we've got the third group of soldiers. Bear in mind, these are still technically the same soldiers, but we have to use different assets in the game in order to make it appear like it's the same soldiers. So all these other guys won't exist, but these guys will exist at the very end of our little scenario here. They will come out of the helicopter and run to in front of my helicopter where the mission itself will end. Make sense? Clear as mud? Still with me? Or did you fall asleep? Because there's still one more thing that we need to talk about, and that is how we tied all of this stuff in together with the trigger zones. So we've had to set the rules for all the triggers. This is what the list of triggers, this is the meat and potatoes, what actually makes the mission work. First and foremost, the first trigger, when the time is more than 1 second, in other words, the moment you get in that cockpit on whatever plane you've been assigned, once that counter starts and 1 second has gone past, it's going to turn the AI off of that very first group of soldiers. Why is it doing that? Well, anything that is spawned into the game, if it has a waypoint, the moment it spawned into the game, it's going to start moving to that waypoint unless it has something to prevent it from doing that. That's where group AI off soldiers comes in. So it's going to tell these guys the moment I get into the cockpit and the mission officially starts, hey, don't move. Stay there. Now you start seeing how this all comes together, because that's where this trigger zone says soldiers move. Once we get to that zone with the main helicopter in this whole shindig here, it's going to turn the AI on for the soldiers and tell them to start moving towards the end of the runway. That's how we get them to work. Ignore these here. These are basically my official door test to see if I could actually open the doors automatically. That's like advanced stuff. We're not even going to go into that, but I'm going to leave it here just for sake of argument, just so my helicopter has something to do in the beginning. Alright, now the actual pickup, here's how that works. When the helicopter gets to this point, we remember that the helicopter's already been triggered to land. As soon as the helicopter's in the zone, the soldiers are in the zone, and it doesn't have to be all the soldiers, just a part of the soldiers. And as soon as the helicopter has basically stopped moving, the speed is lower than 1, the vertical speed is lower than 1, the altitude is pretty much the level of the runway or the tarmac, and this last one, it says cockpit argument in range. Basically what that's saying is the rotors are level. In other words, they're not pitching in any particular direction that would indicate that this sucker is supposed to take off or land. Once all of those items are true, it will deactivate the first group of soldiers and turn on flag number 1. Now remember flag number 1 we were talking about earlier? That's what tells this helicopter, hey, you can go ahead and take off now. That's how we do it. Once flag 1 is on, Helo will take off and then move on to its next waypoint, which is of course the drop-off. Same story at the drop-off. Once we get there, we want to make sure that the helicopter is in the zone, that its speed is at 0, its vertical speed is at 0, its altitude is tarmac level, and the rotors are flat. They are not at any pitch whatsoever. When that happens, we're going to activate 2 groups this time. We're going to activate the second group of Russian soldiers that are going to run around the airport and attack these guys. And we're also going to activate the enemy soldiers, the American soldiers that are going to be coming this way. In addition to which, we're going to set up flag number 3. Now flag number 3 is a little bit different than the other flags because that's basically just serving as a timer for us. We don't want anything to happen before the time is up on flag number 3, so we go to this pickup one. We want to count off about 4 minutes. It should take no less than 4 minutes for our soldiers to get around this little triangle here and take on the soldiers and win. So if 4 minutes have not expired, this helicopter is not going to take off yet until that 4 minutes is done, because it's giving enough time for the events to take place. So for the pickup, we want to make sure that 4 minutes have elapsed. We want to make sure that at least one of those soldiers is in the drop-off zone, and that the helicopter is still in the drop-off zone. Because we don't know for sure if these soldiers, when they get a little bit closer, if they're going to start shooting at the helicopter, if the helicopter is going to take off and try to run away. It shouldn't, in theory, but it's kind of like a failsafe to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere. Alright, so, provided all these items are true, turn off flag 3, we no longer need the timer. Turn on flag 2, which, if you remember from before, triggers the helicopter to take off and go back on its merry way, and of course deactivate the second group of soldiers. So there we go. We're done with that whole area. We're moving back home. And then we have our final drop-off. Our final drop-off is, of course, right here. Same story applies. You got your final drop-off zone. Want to make sure that the helo is in the zone. Want to make sure that everything is at 0 or flat pitch. And that will trigger us to activate this third group of soldiers, soldiers 002. Now I also have flag number 5. Flag number 5 doesn't do anything for the mission except one thing, and I'm going to show you that right now. It's going to count up for 30 seconds, and when it reaches 30 seconds, it's going to give me a message that says, okay, this test is done. Hope it all worked well. It's that simple. You can use those flags to set up various messages that you want different players to hear. If you have like a multiplayer thing, or for single player, you can have it as a victory condition or a fail condition to give you a little pep talk message to tell you, hey, you know, you did it. That's what this is all about. So this marks the official end of the mission when we see this. Now, I've talked your ear off. I bet you would love to see how all of this stuff comes together. Let's do that right now. I'm going to go ahead and save, even though I didn't really make any changes. And let's start the mission. We'll see you in a bit. Okay, and now we are in the mission itself. So I'm going to go ahead and click Fly Mission. You should be used to seeing this by now. This is usually how I start all of my missions. We're not actually flying, so we want to get out of the helicopter here and go to External View. Now, if you recall, I told you about those triggers in the beginning of my little script there. That's basically what it does. It opens all the doors, it closes all the doors, it makes sure that the doors can open individually. So it's going to do that for like the first minute or so. And as you can see, here's our first group of Russian soldiers just kind of standing around doing nothing at the moment. They're waiting for the helicopter to come in, which I don't think we can see the helicopter from here. It's just behind that hill. So as soon as these doors are done opening and closing, I'll show that to you. Right behind me, you'll see the FARP. That's that Forward Arming and Refueling Post. That is pretty much where our helicopter is going to land after this little shindig is done. Okay, now that we have made sure that the doors all work, let's go ahead and take a look at the star of our show, the other Mi-8 HIP that's coming to pick up those soldiers right now. Alright, there's our little guy. And the lag is real already. Lovely. Okay, he's got his landing lights on. And he should be passing that trigger zone that I showed you on the mission editor map any minute now. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to the little Russian soldier dudes. And as soon as they start moving, that'll be a pretty clear indicator that our helo has passed the trigger zone. Or at least gotten to the trigger zone. Because it really doesn't need to pass it completely. There we go. Okay. So that has given these guys the command to actually move, and now they're going to take their own sweet, precious time to get down to the end of the tarmac. I hope they don't keep our helicopter waiting too long. Now, I've been messing around with the labels as well, too. I downloaded something that allows me to change the color of the labels as well as when the labels actually show up. I have it set perfectly for aircraft, but I need to change it for like ground troops and stuff like that, because you really don't need to see the labels on a ground troop if they're like right in front of you. Okay, so pretty soon this guy will be down, and when these guys get into range of that little trigger zone, they will literally disappear, and it will be assumed that they got inside the helicopter. Now, even though we saw the clamshell doors open and the side doors open on my helicopter, unfortunately, there is not a way, or at least I have not found a way, to do that with AI helicopters. Only the player-controlled helicopters will allow you to open and close the doors, so it looks like it's realistically embarking the troops. So we're going to fudge that a little bit and just wait until these guys get within 30 meters of the helicopter, make them disappear, and trigger the helicopter to take off, assuming that the troops are all on board. And that's about to take place right now, so let's switch it to view of the helicopter. There we go. So now our troops are on board. Helicopter takes off and proceeds to waypoint 2, which is across the bay. What I'm going to do, for sake of time, is I'm going to go ahead and speed it up by pressing Control Z about 4 times. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that just speeds up time a little bit, so that way we don't really have to sit for the whole 6 minutes that it's going to take for them to get across the bay here. Oh yeah, that's right. If you rotate around, it also rotates really quickly, so you got to be careful with that. Now the other interesting thing that I've noticed about the AI helicopters here is before it lands, it actually hovers in place and tries to get into the right position before coming down. It always lands vertically. I don't know why that is, and I don't know how to change that behavior so it looks a little bit more fluid. So unfortunately, whenever you see me do videos that feature AI helicopters landing, you're going to see that. You're going to see where it pretty much hovers in midair, finds its spot, and then decides to come down. Player helicopters, of course, we don't have that limitation because you're in charge of the helicopter. Okay, so here we have Gelendzhik. Now, remember, our American soldiers have not spawned yet. They will not spawn until the Russian soldiers spawn. So let's get ready to put time back to its regular pace, which I will do right about now. Perfect timing. And our American soldiers are going to appear from across the way where those barracks are, and they're going to be running straight towards us. Unfortunately, like I said before, they're going to be running to their doom. I could have picked on any country's soldiers for this. I just use Americans because they were the first one that popped up on the list. I got nothing against the country, so don't crucify me, please. And this is what I was talking about. It finds just the right spot before it actually comes down right on the button. And our troops will spawn right there. So they're now spawned, and since they don't have anything holding them back, they're going to start moving to their waypoint. In addition to which, if you look over there, you'll see that nifty olive green labeling that indicates the American troops are on the move as well. Now, let's look at it from the standpoint of these guys over here. I'm actually going to zoom time forward just a touch here. I think twice should do the trick. That should give these guys enough time to get into position here. So again, these guys are just following their programming. They're programmed to run to the end of the runway and then turn around and go down the runway about halfway and then go back to the helo. Since there are enemy troops along the way and those enemy troops have shoot to kill orders, they're going to stop and engage said enemy troops. Much like they're going to do in a few seconds. There we go. So as you can see, the closer that the enemy troops get, the more these guys are going to want to pick their firing spots and just go to town. Now I kind of cheated a little bit here because the Russian troops are the star of our movie. I actually set them to be invulnerable. So unfortunately, all the American guys are going to end up getting shot, and the Russian guys are going to be alive at the end of this little engagement. The only reason why I did it that way is so that for the remaining portions of this, where I need to pick up 6 troops and drop off 6 troops back at the airport, they'll still have 6 troops. They won't have like less than 6 troops, because I'm pretty sure if I actually set these guys to fight each other just naturally, they'd probably wipe each other out. The AI is pretty damn good when it comes to killing each other, I will say that. Okay, so as you can see, all the Americans have sadly been defeated. We will write letters to their families later. Our Russian guys are still in the kneeling position. That's going to last for about a minute, maybe a little bit less. And then once they have been triggered with the all clear, which is something that happens behind the scenes, you don't do anything to cause that to happen, they will go ahead and get up and continue on their path, which I believe they were pretty close to their first waypoint, which should be right on the numbers there. So we'll kind of hang out here, wait until they get up, and then I'll speed up time again until they get close to the helicopter. Alright, here they go. They are getting back on their merry way. They've successfully defended this Russian airport from the enemy, and now they're going to continue their little patrol. There are ways that you can push waypoints. Like if I wanted to, instead of having them just resume their patrol, I could have had them go directly back to the last waypoint in their series, which would have been right next to the helicopter. I didn't program that in. That's a little bit more complex, but it can be done. If you set certain conditions, like if you kill all the enemy, there's no point you continuing your patrol, head back to your original starting location. You can do that. You can definitely do that. There's that kind of freedom with this mission editor, and I love it so much. Alright, I did promise to speed up time, so let's do that real quick. 4 should be sufficient. And we have now entered the Benny Hill mode. So when these guys get to the center of the runway, they're going to hang a left and head back to the helo. They should be approaching that spot right about here, thereabouts. Or maybe not. Maybe it's further down. There we go. There we go. Okay, so now they're going to head back to the helicopter, and just like before, when they get to that trigger zone where the helicopter is currently parked inside of, which is about a 30-meter diameter, they will disappear. Helicopter will get the word, okay, time to take off. So let's go back to the helicopter's view, and we'll wait for our boys to come back before we can take them home. Now, one thing is important to note. You'll notice that they're actually going around the helicopter. Their destination point is exactly where that helicopter is parked, so they will always try to find a way to go around things instead of going through it. Sometimes the AI glitches and it'll go through stuff, but 9 times out of 10, if you set something in the same spot as something else, they'll try to find a way around it. Same goes for flying. If you set a flight path where your altitude is a little too low and it needs to go over a mountain, it will find a way to get over that mountain to get to the next waypoint, and it'll try to stay at the altitude that you originally set it to. So if it's, for example, 200 feet above sea level, it'll try to stay at 200 feet above sea level, it'll go over the mountain, and it'll come back down to about 200 feet over sea level. Okay, this is going to be a long journey back, so I'm going to go ahead and speed up time once more. And that way we can take a look at Galenzic's suburbs and the mountains in between Galencic and Novorossiysk. You see off in the distance, that will be my helicopter, my little observer. I have to have my helicopter in there, otherwise the entire thing will just crash the desktop. You can't just have a mission with nothing but AI craft. You have to have at least one player craft in there. And once again, we've got that gorgeous scenery that Eagle Dynamics has graced us with. I really cannot wait to see what DCS World 2.0 is going to bring to the beauty of scenery in this game, because it's already pretty freaking impressive. Okay, so we're taking the scenic route around the port here. You can start to see bits and pieces of the city popping up. Here's a nice little marina. There's some sailboats. If you look real close, you can see some sunbathers and some sun umbrellas. Real resort town going on here. You kind of rotate around. There's the big, huge port. There's the cruise ships. And there's that landmark building that I still have no idea what exactly it is, but it looks like it's something that's prominent for the city of Novorossiysk. Maybe I'll have to do like a Google search and figure out exactly what this building is. That would be this one right down there. The other thing I really love about this game are the built-up areas. When I used to play Microsoft FSX, Flight Simulator X, built-up areas didn't look nearly as impressive as this. This is cool, and you can actually set like tanks and soldiers in between these buildings and have an actual urban battle, an honest-to-goodness urban battle in this city. You could blow up buildings, you could set random explosions to happen, you could do all kinds of good stuff. So you could see there's a lot of creativity that opens up to you in the mission editor for this game. I can't speak highly enough about how they have this thing set up and how you can actually manipulate all the various assets to make a really kick-ass mission. If I wanted to blow up that little cooling tower that we're just now going past, I could trigger that to blow up, say if, you know, the helicopter lands nearby and dispatches some troops, kind of like I did with that Spetsnaz video that I recently put up. But yeah, all kinds of options abound. There's so much potential that can be done, and so far I've seen a lot of really kick-ass missions that people have done. See, there's even a soccer stadium over here. There's no telling what the hell we can do with a soccer stadium. Might use it as a staging ground to hold troops or something like that. You never know. You never know. You got civilian traffic, which you can blow up. All kinds of stuff can be done. Alright, so we are coming back to our final destination, and that is the airport of our origin, Novorossiysk. So what's going to happen, if you remember on the mission editor screen, is our helicopter is going to go smack dab to the center of the airport and drop these guys off on the grass. After they've exited the helicopter, they are going to run to in front of my helicopter, and then this dude is going to take off and land right behind my helicopter at that farm. So here we go. Here's our second to last landing for the day. Of course, he's going to mosey around and find his right position before he actually stops. And here he goes. I think he's getting ready to come down. Now, if you remember also when I showed you how I actually came up with the landing parameters on this particular one, there is no event trigger like event number 1 or event number 2. Instead, I simply have a 20-second timer. So as soon as this guy actually gets down, he's got 20 seconds and then he automatically takes off and leaves. You don't want to use that in a lot of settings, but in something like this where all you're doing is spawning troops and then the troops will leave, they're never going to come back to the helicopter, it's kind of useful. So here we go. There's our guys, they spawned out, and 20 seconds will elapse before this helicopter takes off. I guess that one dude decided he didn't want to go this way. That does sometimes happen. Sometimes the one guy will like glitch out. It's not a perfect system by any stretch, but he will eventually catch up. And it doesn't really matter anyway because it's the end of the mission. So okay, this helicopter is going to go out, and there's our final little message that says, okay, this test is done. Hope it all worked well. And it did. It worked flawlessly. So we're going to switch it back to me, since this is pretty much the end. And the last thing that we need to do now is just wait for our little guys to show up, as well as this other helicopter to come in and land. So I'm going to speed up time one more time. Helicopter's most likely going to land before the little guys show up. So let's go ahead and get time back to its regular state. And watch this guy come in. Now, if I had not put this FARP behind me, what would have ended up happening is this guy would have gone like 10 miles out to sea before actually turning around and landing on that runway in front of me. We don't want that. We just want him to come in and land. So that's exactly what he does when you actually have a FARP in there. So for future missions, if I have AI helicopters that are going to be a part of the missions, then I'm going to be adding a FARP to the airport, so you'll always see that familiar T that indicates that there's going to be helicopters landing or taking off from this particular area. And we'll just leave the runways for planes. Alright, so once he lands, since this is his last destination, he'll go ahead and power down. And our little guys are walking around the fuel trucks to get to where my helicopter is. You did an excellent job, guys. I'm going to go ahead and open up the back because I've got some beer for you. Feel free to hop in here and grab yourself a six-pack. You have earned it. Okay, that's pretty much it. That is what a mission consists of. That's how you mission edit. That's what it looks like when you actually pull it off. Not too shabby, if I should say so myself. And this is a quick, easy, painless mission here. So you can imagine some of the fun stuff that you can do with more complicated things. But there you go. Now you have an idea as to how I actually pull all this stuff together. And it's real easy. Just about anybody can do it. It just takes, a little bit of time learning the system. It's a very logical system, but it's also a very intuitive system. Alright, so I hope you've enjoyed that. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy seeing this. And of course, you can always find me on Twitch at www.twitch.tv/BelGeode. Okay, folks, have an excellent evening. Ciao.